منكمل مؤتمرنا وهلأ الجلسة التالية تحت عنوان The End of Print Media, a Decline or Rebirth Phase، وبتتمحور حول موضوع الإعلام التقليدي ومصيره بظل التطور بالإعلام الرقمي. وبدير الجلسة الصحافي اللبناني بشير الخوري، وبيحاور كل من رمزي حافظ Publisher at InfoPro، فريدريك بيكار Editor-in-Chief of Figaro حضر خصيصاً من فرنسا، نيلا تويني Editor-in-Chief and Chairperson of النهار Newspaper. من المملكة المتحدة براين ويتكر former Middle East Editor of The Guardian and writer of the blog on Middle East Affairs at Al-Bab.
Welcome everybody to this panel, and let me start with this introductory note and then present our distinguished panelists. The media landscape has been undergoing a form of revolution over the past 20 years, which has accelerated during the last decade with the emergence of social networks, the proliferation of cable TV channels, news websites, blogs, and more recently applications dedicated to the broadcast and the selection of information, which is now moving at a crazy pace, while new jobs have emerged in parallel, such as community management, data journalism, and development of numerical structures. The first victim, quote unquote, of this digital revolution is no doubt the traditional newspaper and its authors, which have long been the sole source of information and analysis. The classical print media, which has stamped the life of generations, but has also accompanied, sometimes even provoking, the rise and fall of many social and political movements or regimes since the beginning of the 18th century, but also sustaining the healthy functioning of Western democracies, seems 300 years later to be joining the category of disappearing species. Every year, thousands of jobs are destroyed around the world, while newspapers, when they ever survive, are facing severe financial difficulties linked from an economic point of view to a very strong supply of information associated with a decline in demand for the classical type of print media, especially among new generations. From a cultural perspective, this phenomenon can be explained by the extensive use of new technologies, the burgeoning and fragmentation of platforms for the expression of ideas, thoughts, and frustration, a much more frenetic daily life, allowing very little time to read compared with the previous era, but also a profound mutation of subjects of interest among readers with the fall of the major ideological debates and battles that had characterized the 20th century. Illustrating this sharp decline of the classical print media, a study published in 2006 by researcher Robert Picard revealed that daily sales of newspapers in the United States was 53.8 million in 1950, compared with 54.6 million in 2004, while total population increased by 131 million over the same period. This represents a 48% drop in sales per 1,000 inhabitants, knowing that these results were before the emergence of Facebook, Twitter, and other social networks. In Lebanon, the landscape is all the darker. Not only print media, but all the categories of media are faced with an unprecedented financial pressure, illustrated in recent years by payment delays or even a total halt of payment of employees' wages. Today, some observers fear a collective collapse of the Lebanese press, which for decades was the only free and qualitative one in the Arab world. To discuss but this dynamic is not unanimous on a global scale. In some countries such as India, not only newspapers are growing, but their growth prospects are proportionate with their size or development. To discuss all these themes, I am pleased to welcome among us today Frédéric Picard, Editor-in-Chief of Le Figaro for both the print and web night editions, Brian Whitaker, former Middle East editor of The Guardian and writer of the blog on Middle East Affairs Al-Bab, Naila Twaini, Editor-in-Chief and Chairperson of Al-Nahar newspaper, and Ramzi Al-Hafiz, Managing Director at InfoPro. But before launching the debate, let us please watch this 3-minute track of an investigative documentary produced in August 2014 by Marie-Ève Chamard and Philippe Kieffer for Arte, the French-German channel.
minute de silence au quotidien El País contre les réductions d'effectifs. Die-in pour dénoncer les plans sociaux dans la presse allemande. Crise en Grande-Bretagne, en Italie. Disparition de France Soir et de la Tribune à Paris. Aux États-Unis, c'est l'hécatombe. 150 quotidiens ont fermé leurs portes en 10 ans. Pendant des années, les journaux ont rythmé notre vie. Nous les avons lus, nous y avons travaillé, nous les avons aimés. Aujourd'hui, ils ne se vendent plus, ou si mal, que leur avenir est menacé. Sommes-nous les seuls à nous en inquiéter?
Passionnés d'information, nous avons voulu comprendre ce qui arrive à la presse écrite, en allant à la rencontre de ceux qui la font, en essayant de saisir sur le vif, à Paris comme à Berlin, à New York ou New Delhi, comment et vers quoi évoluent des journaux condamnés à se transformer ou à mourir.
Une enquête qui commence à Paris, place de la République.
D'abord, la presse elle est trop chère en France, il faut être honnête. Il faut avoir les moyens. 2,90, 3,90, 4,40. La grande différence, il y a 26 ans, quand j'ai commencé dans le métier, vous demandiez à n'importe qui dans la rue, il était capable de vous citer le nom de tous les grands éditorialistes. Tous. C'était que des grandes pubs. Maintenant, vous demandez aux gens, même le nom d'un journaliste, vous n'en avez pas. Quand vous achetiez Libé dans les années 80, c'était un vrai mouvement militant. Aujourd'hui, ça ne veut rien dire.
Frédéric Picard, justement, en se basant sur ce passage-là, est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire comment la presse écrite aujourd'hui se porte en France dans une perspective historique et dans quelle mesure justement la presse écrite est-elle réellement en difficulté comparativement à la télé, la radio ou les plateformes multi-supports?
D'abord, vous m'entendez bien? Oui. D'abord, je tiens, May, à te remercier. Si c'est pour me remercier. Oui, bah justement, je vais le faire. D'abord, je tiens très sincèrement, May, à te remercier. Te remercier de m'avoir invité, je suis très touché. Tu sais que je reprends l'avion tout de suite après parce qu'on a de grosses élections en France. Mais je trouve que ce rassemblement est important parce que quand on parle de la presse, c'est qu'on parle de la démocratie. Et quand on parle de la démocratie, c'est qu'on parle de la vie. Et je rends hommage aussi au fait qu'il y ait cette académie qui naisse, parce que l'académie, ça va permettre aux jeunes générations d'apprendre à communiquer, d'apprendre à partager. Et tu le sais, si je le peux, je viendrai à chaque fois, si ce n'est partager mon savoir, au moins partager mon approche. Voilà, je t'en prie. Pour répondre donc à votre question, il faut savoir de quoi on parle. Le sujet est très important là. En France, par exemple, c'est le sujet que je connais le mieux. La presse écrite quotidienne est en grosse difficulté. Par contre, la presse magazine, la presse news a de moins de difficultés que la presse quotidienne. Il faut savoir que si on reprend le paysage, vers 1913-1915, la France était le deuxième support d'information en Europe et le troisième à travers le monde. Nous avons essuyé 2 guerres, puis la crise, et par défaut, beaucoup de journaux ont fermé, ce qui a été une catastrophe pour la démocratie et pour le pluralisme. Aujourd'hui, si on reprend les journaux quotidiens, il faut, non pas comme on le dit dans le reportage, par défaut se modifier, c'est qu'il faut absolument voir les choses différemment. Hegel disait que la lecture du quotidien du matin était la première prière matinale. Ça a complètement changé. Les choses ont été totalement bouleversées. En France comme ailleurs, le web, le numérique, le digital, comme on l'appelle maintenant, est un nouveau support. Donc, pour répondre à votre question, il y a 2 choses. La première, c'est de dire que la presse écrite a encore de très, 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 très belles journées devant elle, parce qu'on n'a jamais autant écrit, et on n'écrira jamais autant. Par contre, le support papier quotidien, lui, a de grosses, grosses difficultés. Alors justement, vous faites cette distinction en presse écrite sur le web et presse écrite sur le format papier. Qu'en est-il spécifiquement du Figaro, justement? Comment est-ce que vos ventes du journal papier ont-elles évolué ces dernières années? Et aussi, quelles
quels sont les taux de croissance de, par exemple, des abonnés sur votre site?
Alors, j'ai demandé juste avant de venir quelques chiffres pour savoir exactement de quoi on parlait. Le Figaro est né en 1826. Aujourd'hui, en France, c'est la première marque média avec 20 millions de lecteurs par mois. Sur ces 20 millions de lecteurs, les chiffres exacts, c'est à peu près 56% des lecteurs lisent le Figaro via le web. Je ne parle pas que des applications, via le web. Et donc 44% print. Mais sur ces 44% print, il n'y en a plus que 21% exclusivement print. Les autres lisent, découvrent le journal papier sur leur tablette. Vous voyez un petit peu l'évolution. Si nous n'avions pas pris ce tournant il y a à peu près une dizaine d'années, les choses seraient très très compliquées. Aujourd'hui, à peu près sur 600 journalistes qui représentent le groupe Figaro, tous médias confondus, c'est-à-dire quotidien, magazine et télévision, sur ces 600 journalistes, il y en a à peu près 150 qui ne travaillent exclusivement que pour le web. Parce que nous avons pris ce tournant en se disant que, et on y reviendra j'espère, que l'information en temps réel, tout le monde l'avait. C'est l'exemple de ce que l'on vit ici, que ce soit sur Twitter ou sur Facebook, tout le monde l'a. Donc il fallait qu'on soit suffisamment pertinent pour la donner aussi à nos lecteurs, mais que le print et ou les supports comme le Figaro.fr se devaient d'avoir des journalistes qui puissent donner un tout petit peu de perspective pour comprendre un peu mieux et décrypter ce qui était en train de se passer.
D'accord, très bien. Alors, j'aimerais vous poser cette dernière question avant de passer à votre collègue britannique. Lorsqu'on était en train de discuter avant ce panel, vous me disiez « je ne suis pas d'accord avec la terminologie révolution digitale, je préfère parler de Big Bang
Ouais. ».
Alors, est-ce que vous pouvez, s'il vous plaît, nous élucider ce point de vue?
Oui, parce que pour moi, ayant assez étudié ce dossier passionnant, c'est que des révolutions, on en a vécu énormément. Si on reprend le sens de l'histoire, on a eu dans un premier temps, on a eu la presse écrite, puis on a eu la radio, puis on a eu la télévision. À chaque fois, les déclinistes nous ont dit le média précédent va disparaître. Or, chacun a trouvé parfaitement sa place dans cet univers. Simplement, ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'il y a eu le Big Bang. Et pour moi, le Big Bang, c'est cette météorite numérique qui est venue simultanément impacter les trois médias. Et à partir de ce moment-là, à partir du moment où il y a eu impact, il y a eu Big Bang. Et un Big Bang, en fait, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est un univers en expansion permanent, je dis bien permanent, avec des planètes qui s'éloignent du cœur en fusion, c'est-à-dire la demande des internautes, des lecteurs, donc qui meurent, et d'autres qui s'en rapprochent. Et ce Big Bang, ça a créé ce que nous vivons aujourd'hui quand on parle de crise de la presse. Moi, je dis plutôt crise de l'information. C'est qu'il y a eu une fragmentation du lectorat, il y a eu une fragmentation des émetteurs, il y a eu donc par défaut une fragmentation du temps, et le temps est une des données essentielles dans la lecture de l'information d'aujourd'hui ou de demain. C'est que les gens ont moins de temps parce qu'il y a fragmentation des supports. Et par défaut, les annonceurs ne s'y retrouvent plus. Pourquoi? Parce qu'à partir du moment où hier, quelqu'un avait le temps de lire, d'aller dans son journal, de prendre son journal, aujourd'hui, il y a cette fragmentation. Et cette fragmentation fait que on ne sait pas si on va aller sur tel site, sur Twitter, sur Facebook. N'oubliez pas que Facebook, c'est quand même 1,5 milliard de personnes qui s'informent de plus en plus via ces supports, et j'espère qu'on en reparlera, parce que quand on vient de vivre ce qu'on a vécu avec les États-Unis, c'est un média important, mais il faut quand même faire attention et relativiser les propos qui sont sur Facebook ou sur Twitter. Et je discutais tout à l'heure avec Zéna justement de l'intervention de M. Assange que j'ai trouvée passionnante. Quand on voit que sur les réseaux sociaux, quelques personnes commencent à se dire « est-ce que c'était vraiment lui? Est-ce qu'il était là ?» Donc il va falloir commencer à se justifier, la théorie du complot va commencer à monter. C'est très important de savoir qu'il y en a dans tous les sens. C'est normal parce qu'on est dans un univers en expansion, que j'espère que les choses vont s'aplanir petit à petit.
On va justement parler tout à l'heure des limites des réseaux sociaux dans le relais de l'information. Mr. Brian Whitaker, let me ask you about the situation in Great Britain. Last March, the Independent became the first national newspaper to embrace a digital-only future. after putting an end to its print production. As for The Guardian, its daily print circulation is now below 160,000, roughly 1/3 of what it was in the 1990s. Do you expect it to become entirely digital soon? And more generally speaking, how do you describe the situation of British newspapers compared with its peers in Europe or in the States?
Well, I think the thing to make clear, first of all, is that the need for ink on paper is shrinking quite dramatically. I looked at some figures. In the year 2000, consumption of paper, paper, not newspapers, was 13 million tons. That has now gone down to 9 million tons last year, so quite a significant drop over a 15-year period. And that is also reflected by what's happened to newspapers generally, that the circulations have been steadily declining, but there's been this switch to digital media in the meantime. And of course, digital, storing information digitally rather than on paper gives you, well, first of all, it's often very much cheaper, it's easier, and in a lot of situations it's more convenient. But the switch from print to digital by the newspapers has some other effects besides just a change of medium. Printing gives a newspaper a loud voice compared with people in the street, shall we say. It's also generally been a one-directional voice, the newspaper telling people things. What you get with digital is that readers are able to answer back a lot of the time and express their own points of view, and also you have a much more equal playing field where other people can start publishing news as well. And quite sometimes people who really don't know what they're doing, but that's an issue to discuss. Also, with digital publishing, you can measure how many times people have looked at a particular article, which was something you couldn't really do very well with printed newspapers. And so you might then reflect on the economics of that, where let's suppose an article costs $200 to produce, which is not an unreasonable amount of money these days. Is that going to attract enough readers to get $200 worth of advertising to pay for it? And I think a lot of the time the answer is that it's not. Another thing is the way people read newspapers, because going back 30 years, people would have a newspaper delivered to their home. Certainly in Britain, that's what most people did, and there would be the family's newspaper, which they would stick with all the time. What we now see online, well, first of all, people might be, instead of reading the newspaper over breakfast, they would be checking their emails or looking on Twitter and Facebook and things to see what's going on. But also, you don't now read a newspaper starting from page 1, working through to the end, as people did. You turn over one page after another. So there are kind of multiple entry points. And also, it becomes much easier to switch. If you're trying to read about a certain story that interests you, then you may not stick to one newspaper. You will look at that topic on Google, and you will find reports in all sorts of places. And so the old idea of reader loyalty to a particular newspaper or a particular brand, I think, is going out of the window. And there are some ways that newspapers are trying to combat that, but again, I think they have problems.
Okay, but the newspapers are actually today forced to go digital, but at the same time there's a major trick. It's how to build a viable, sustainable economic model, and that's why I would like to ask you about the case of The Guardian. Your readership has grown substantially on the website today. There's something like 30 million page impressions daily and more than 7 million unique visitors every month. Yet there are only 50,000 paying members. So my question is, how is the group doing to manage the situation financially, and what is the current economic model built upon?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not speaking sort of for The Guardian. I'm just sort of telling you what my view of it is. The Guardian has. The Guardian has substantial investments, which I think are about £700 million. So it can afford to be produced at a loss, so long as the losses do not exceed the income from the investments. So that's one particular thing about the Guardian. The problem, though, is how you actually balance out the economics. The paper depends mainly on advertising revenue. That's the most important source of income. Now, the expectation was that as they transferred from print to digital, the advertising would move over. And so what they lost on the print side, they would make up on the advertising side. What has happened in the meantime is that the market for digital advertising has become much more diffuse. And so advertising which was placed with print newspapers is not necessarily going to the digital newspapers, it might be going to Facebook, it might be going to lots of other websites which actually have more people looking at them than newspapers. So that's a big factor. Now, some newspapers have tried to charge readers, so you would take out a paying subscription to the Times newspaper, for example, and the Times is quite strict about how much you can read without paying. You read the first couple of paragraphs of each article. The New York Times and the Financial Times in Britain have a slightly different model where you can read a certain number of articles per month without paying. The Guardian took a slightly different route, which was to have, not to have paying access, but to have a membership scheme, which was for people who identified with the newspaper in some way. So again, you're sort of talking about trying to reintroduce a certain brand loyalty. And so you would pay, there are different levels of membership. We pay between, I think it's £1 a week going up to, I think, 600 and something pounds a year. And that would entitle you, depending on your level of membership, to various things, such as meetings with Guardian journalists, to sort of talk to them or listen to them speaking face to face, to attend various events organised by the newspaper and that sort of thing. So it becomes a bit of a club rather than simply having a commercial transaction. But again, that, in terms of revenue, that is pretty small.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian Whitaker. Ramzi Al-Hafiz, Lebanon Opportunities is a paper magazine that didn't really go into a digital version. You seem to be wanting to resist to the worldwide tendency, and but it is still doing very well. How do you explain that, and why? And don't you fear a drop in your sales? Like in a couple of years, on a medium term, if you don't go through this worldwide transition?
Thank you. Just a clarification. We don't have a web version of the magazine, but we have web properties. We have web products, publishing products. Just you don't get to read the entire magazine on the web. And the reason we have this policy is because we got terrified by the web. When more than 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the Daily Star, which at the time was much more prominent than now, was at the forefront, and maybe were the first, I don't know if they were the first, but they were one of the first who published their newspaper online. And it was such a success, their online property, that it killed the newspaper. And when they used to go to advertisers and ask for advertising, they used to tell them, but nobody reads your newspaper. Everybody reads it online. and say, okay, give us advertising online. And say, oh, we don't have budgets for online. So that opened our eyes at the time, and we learned from that lesson. And if you want to go digital, at least in our type of media, which is more specialized media, where we rely mostly on our own content. We don't rely on content available elsewhere, as in press agencies or daily economic events, which everybody else has access to. We focused on our brand, and we focused on us being the only place where you can find this type of information. And therefore, we focused on content rather on medium of delivery. Because we haven't seen anywhere in the world, really, a website, a news website, that is not trying to mimic the print version. With some additions, with some modifications, etc. But really, it's a copy, more or less, of the model of the newspaper or of the magazine. I know last night we were discussing, and Le Figaro is saying that only 30% of what's in the newspaper you can find on the web. But it is not just this particular article. It is the way you develop the story, the way you tell your story, the way you title your story on the web today. You look at the New York Times, even you look at CNN, you look at everybody, and they are trying to mimic the original.
Yeah,
and it is, imagine that for a TV newscast, instead of having a TV newscast, you'll just read the lead story in the newspaper to your audience. You can imagine what a failure that would be. So there is a difference between, are we talking about paper as a medium of delivery only? Or are we talking about a new way of journalism, a new way of reporting, a new way of telling a story on the web that should be different than what's in print? I don't think that new way has materialized itself yet anywhere. I mean, I haven't seen it.
But to which extent is this related, as far as magazines are concerned, to the fact that there is no competition as we observe in the newspaper arena? Because this is not a discourse that is held by CEOs of newspapers in Lebanon. All are seeking to go digital because they, based on figures, they are seeing their sales dropping very sharply. So in the case of Lebanon Opportunities and other economic magazines in Lebanon, like Le Commerce du Levant, for example, in French, it's the only French-edited economic magazine. My question is, to what extent the fact that there is no competition on the market leads actually to a concentration, a type of concentration of advertising in these magazines? This is my first question. My second, this is more general, it doesn't apply to magazines, but do you think that the fact that the Lebanese society is not as digitalized as Western societies, making, for example, Lebanon Opportunities continuing to survive without going digital?
There is competition. It's not true that there is no competition. Whether in readers' perspective or with advertisers. With readers' perspective, with the advent of the web, you're competing with everybody in the world. People don't read our magazine because it is in English. They don't read it instead of reading a newspaper or Le Commerce du Levant because it is in English. in our domain, business, most people who are bilingual anyway. At least half of our readers are bilingual, and all those who are French, who know French, know English. But we are competing with the attention of people, because maybe people don't even want to read business material, because there is something more interesting on TV, or because there is something more interesting on when they're browsing the website, etc. So we are always competing for the few minutes of attention of people who are in our target market. I don't think that the level of digitization, at least in our target market, is different than the Western world, because our target market is the upper market, and it's 100% digitized now everywhere in the world.
But how do you, this is my last question, Mr. Al-Hafiz, how do you explain the fact that magazines in Lebanon, paper magazines, are doing better, are managing better financially than newspapers?
Okay.
I mean, they are not affected by this crisis that we call today the media crisis,
Okay.
whether locally or internationally.
Yes. Okay. There are two aspects to answer this question. The first aspect is that this is a global phenomenon. It's not just a local phenomenon. Magazines worldwide have not been affected as much as newspapers by the digital advent, and also they have many magazines have been able to be more innovative than newspapers. Also, they have more time, because the magazine is monthly or weekly. It's not daily, so they have more time to produce, etc. And in 2015, we have seen more magazine news starts ever. It was a record year, and 2014 was a record year, and 2013 was a record year. Now, locally, traditionally, now the political magazines have suffered in Lebanon. I mean, we haven't seen new political magazines, that's for sure. And the political magazines who used to play a big role in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s, today they don't exist anymore. I mean, you used to have Al-Hawadith, who was very influential. You used to have Al-Sayyad. You used to have the Al-Sayyad, maybe it's still coming out, but doesn't have that influence. Al-Wasat, etc. For the non-political magazines, the model of the magazine is self-sufficient, self-funding. In the newspapers, we find that all newspapers, historically in Lebanon, at least in my lifetime, had a sugar daddy or several sugar daddies. The feasibility of the newspaper, many people for each newspaper used to back the newspaper, whether political or family or friends or people who liked that title. So what the commercial side did not complete, you had the support funding. And one
Which
of
magazines don't have in Lebanon? Which magazines don't have?
normally no, unless they are political. But a business magazine or a society magazine or a women magazine or a fashion magazine, they have to stand on their own feet or they die.
Okay.
Today, the backers of the newspapers all have had their own financial problems.
We're going to talk about this with
Yeah.
Naila Twaini.
And therefore, when you take this element out, in addition to the digital
Revolution
challenge, then you have a problem.
Okay, thank you.